So this is the subject of our lecture today, the project life cycle. And in particular, we will focus on one phase in this project life cycle, the initiation phase, because it is said to be the most important phase in the project. If you start wrong, you will continue wrong, or it will take a lot of resources to correct and rectify the mistakes you do in the initiation phase. So what is it, the project life cycle? Like, what does that mean? Well, project life cycle simply means that we group interrelated tasks along a timeline. Say this group of tasks can be classified as this. This group of tasks can be classified as that. And we group them and we perform them. We call these groups along a timeline phases in response to a rationale. You have a problem you want to respond to, and you are expecting that the project will achieve one or several outcomes. So a project life cycle is a way to organize our work, making we follow a standard process. And this kind of grouping is important for two tasks, or for two main reasons. The first one is to be able to manage, to allocate resources. You say that for this group of tasks, we need engineers. For this group of tasks, we need, for instance, analysts. For this group of tasks, we need carpenters. For this group of tasks, we need software managers, and so on. So it's a way to manage your project, to know what resources and when to involve them and what type of stakeholders you have, okay? The second reason for why do we need this grouping along phases or tasks in order to make decisions. We need points in time. We call them decision gates. And in these decision gates, we make decisions. We say, for instance, the previous group of tasks should be redone. Or we say, okay, the previous group of tasks has been completed successfully. Or we say, maybe we need to reassess the goal of the project. So as you see, the purpose of a project life cycle is twofold: to manage, and this is the project manager domain, and to control, and this is the project owner domain. For example, this is a typical example of a project life cycle from the oil and gas sector. As you can see, these are the groups of tasks, main groups of tasks that should be done. Of course, the duration of each group of tasks can vary. The people, as you can see, the people who will be involved in this group of tasks also will vary. But most importantly, you have these decision gates here, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. As you can see, for instance, the decision gate 3 says decision to sanction the project, that we have completed all the evaluation, we have optimized all the concepts, and then we are facing one important decision. Are we going to continue, or are we going to abandon the project? And in decision gate 4, as you can see, here you have one decision. Are we going to start operation, or we need to stop or to redo something? So as you can see, these 4 levels here, or these 5 boxes on top, they are managerial, top managerial decision, usually by the licensee or the owners of the project. And here, within each group of tasks, you will have a project manager with the team and maybe some other suppliers or subcontractors, and they will work almost separately in order to fulfill the objectives of each group of tasks. This is what we refer to when we talk about project life cycle. We should know in advance what to expect, who will be involved in the decision-making process, and what should they expect as an outcome from each stage in the decision-making process. So it is a managerial tool. Well, in project management, we can distinguish between two types of project life cycle models, two general approaches on how to identify and how to manage your project. We have something called the plan-driven project life cycle model, which simply, as you see from the name, it's a plan-driven or specifications-driven. You know all your specifications, you know all your requirements, and then you define the exact tasks that you need to do, and then you execute, and then you deliver, and you finish. So it is all in once. You do, you plan, you execute, you deliver. But there is another approach to project life cycle, which called the adaptive or incremental model, which means that you don't really define all specifications at once. We grow with the project. We evolve with the project. We develop the project piece by piece. As we go, we learn, we gain more insights, and then we add, we increase the scope of the project. As you can see, these are two different approaches to project execution. And the decision-making processes in these two approaches are very different, as I will illustrate. This is a typical life cycle of a plan-driven approach. As you can see here, I hope, yes. As you can see here, usually this plan-driven approach has 4 or 5 phases. Usually you have an initiation phase where you try to identify your goals, your objectives, your requirements, and then you plan how to do these goals and objectives and requirements. And then you start execution, you put your resources, you put your efforts, and at the same time, you run some sort of control here, making sure that you are following your plan. And then when you approach the end of your project, you start closing out, closing contract, delivering, testing, and evaluation. This is a typical plan-driven approach with clear 4 or 5 decision making. In this decision gate, right after the initiation, here you make a decision: stop, go back, or continue. Similar here. In the planning phase, at the end of the planning phase, you have usually 3 decisions: stop, abandon the project, or continue the project, or redo some of the works. These decision gates, as I said, it's a top management problem, and the work here is what project managers are concerned with. So this is the plan-driven approach. So what characterizes a plan-driven approach actually? First, as you can see, the amount of work at the beginning, you see here, it's very low. And this amount of work increases gradually. You start with the initiation, this is a little work, and when you do planning, you put in more resources, and the execution, when you come to the execution, this is the highest amount of work. So low, higher, 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 very high, and then it starts decrease gradually. Another characteristic of this plan-driven, as you can see at the beginning here, there is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of things you don't know. And this uncertainty decreases gradually. So if I have a chart here, I will start uncertainty very, very high, and will go down as we go, as the project proceeds. And it will goes down because of the amount of knowledge you gain during the project. Because the uncertainty starts very high and decrease gradually, the impact of that is that your ability to influence is higher at the initiation phase and at the planning phase, because here you try to solve most of your problems, and as you can see the effort is low. But when you start the execution phase, what happens? You see there is a lot of resources, so the cost of changes are very high. You risk a lot of losing a lot of money if you start making changes in the execution phase. So here, that's why we say in the plan-driven type of work, you have lots of ability to change here. But once you started your project, change control become very, very important. Another characteristic of this plan-driven, as you can see, that evaluation is done at the end of each stage, not during. It's difficult today to make decisions during execution of one stage. So you wait until the end of stage and then you make a decision, which means again, maybe the decision will come too late or too early. So this weakens your evaluations routines. It is another maybe disadvantage perhaps, or another characteristic of this plan driven is that the customer or the project owner interest is high here because they are involved in the initiation and the decision making process, and they are involved in the closeout phase. But during the project, there is less involvement, which means that this type of plan driven can result in many surprises. Suddenly, at the end or at the closeout, the customer or the end users might come and say, well, this is not what I wanted something else, because simply they were not involved in both the planning and execution stage. Actually, this is a challenging problem. How to make sure that the customer or the end users are involved throughout the project lifecycle. Maybe they don't want, they don't know how, or it is very difficult to come to agreement on a common agreement during this process. So this is in general, the plan driven. It is demanding. It's require a lot of involvement. It has lots of uncertainty. The cost of change increase as we move forward. In order to respond to the challenges of the plan-driven approach, there is the adaptive or incremental approach. Rather than delivering all the scope at once, as you can see, what you do, you divide the scope into small pieces, and you don't have to know all the pieces in advance. It is enough to identify a piece of the puzzle. You solve this puzzle, and then you work, and you develop in short intervals. Therefore, each interval or each piece of work is to be seen as a project or a mini project. This type of doing works reduce the uncertainty. As you know, there is one thing is to look 2 years in the future, and totally another thing to look 1 month in the future. If you look 2 years in the future, you want to plan for 2 years, there are many surprises that you might not know, or you don't have the full overview of. But if you cut these 2 years into 1 month period, you limit the scope and you limit your exposure to uncertainty. And also, it provides you with the opportunity to make a series of evaluations at the end of each mini project. So you don't wait 2 years to evaluate, but you evaluate at the end of each at the end of each mini project. So it's a lot of flexibility. So the adaptive approach is the flexible approach. But of course, it has, again, lots of limitations. For instance, one of the limitations that I could mention that can I come up with now is what type of work you do. If you are talking about software planning or digitalization effort or research effort or study efforts, then this adaptive approach might be possible because you are not producing any physical deliverables. But if you are doing a construction project, let's say a big oil platform, it is very difficult to apply the adaptive approach for the entire life cycle. You can apply it to portions of your project, but not to the entire project. So these are one of the challenges. One more thing that I would like to bring your attention to when we talk about the project life cycle. As I have demonstrated to you, a project life cycle is important for two purposes: to manage and to control, to define the tasks and to be able to execute these tasks. Another important thing in understanding the project life cycle is to answer this question: when it begins and when it ends. Where is the beginning of a project life cycle and where is the end of the project life cycle? One of the typical mistakes which is done in many organizations that they think the project life cycle ends when you deliver an output. So here they say the project life cycle is you plan, you execute, you deliver, and everything stops here. Well, our understanding of a project life cycle have changed over the time. And now we acknowledge that the project life cycle is longer than we expect. And it should include the operation phase. Of course, the project as a task ends when you deliver, but the project as a product continue to live on and will affect the end users. They will affect other stakeholders. So the project has an output, which we call the solution. What do you build? What did you deliver? And it has an outcome. It has an impact. It has an effect on the operation phase. So it is important, therefore, that we try to have a holistic understanding of the project life cycle. In simple terms, in a broader perspective, and from a holistic project life cycle perspective, we have three main categories of stakeholders. We have the project owner, or project owners, or project sponsors, or if you want to say client, or you want to say the customer, or the builder, or the one who orders the project is one category. And then you have the project organization or organizations is another category. And then the third category of stakeholders are the end users or users. In principle, these are the three main categories of stakeholders in a project. Each one of them sees the project from a different perspective. That's why we have three different perspectives of projects or of a project life cycle. The project owner has concerns, has a rationale, as you can see, has a problem they want to address. And then, based on a discussion, an evaluation, they define a solution. They think that this solution will solve the rationale. This is simply the project owner perspective. And the project owner as well define some perspectives or some requirements or some limitations. And then the project organization comes into these pictures and find a way on how to execute this solution, to deliver this solution in response to the rationale. And then finally come the user perspective. The thing that makes project management difficult usually is that the users have their own view of the project. They have concerns about the project. If the project owner and the project organization failed to take these concerns into account, these end users will not use the final product, will not be able to use the final deliverable in an effective way. So failing to involve the end users, or actually in a more accurate way, failing to balance the needs of the project owners and the needs of the end users might cause the project to completely fail. A good project manager, therefore, has this delicate task. I have an owner with some expectations, and I have the end users with some expectations. A good project manager, good project management, good management of the project life cycle is about balancing these two perspectives. So a project life cycle that does not take into consideration the long impact or the long-term impact or the long-term outcome of a project is not effective enough. We will look a little bit more closer on this project initiation process. We said previously that project initiation is a part of the project life cycle. It is where we define the preliminary scope of your project, and the planning phase is based on the outcome of the initiation phase. But we didn't really describe what are the contents or what are the tasks involved in this initiation process. Initiation process starts with something we call the rationale, and it ends up in a document. So actually the outcome of the project initiation process is a document. This document called the charter or the mandate or the project scope. It has many different names, but it is simply a document. So what this document says. So this document simply describes how important the project for the project owner. It is written, it should be written by the owner. And in this document, the project owner should describe the rationale, the goals, and provide important guidelines for the project organizations about the priorities of this project. What's important? Is it important to satisfy the requirement, or is it important to adhere to cost and time constraints, the time window? So here we define the constraints of your project, and you define, of course, why this project should be executed. This document, in one way or another, reflects actually how far the owner is willing to go to have the project completed. So a weak project charter provides a weak support for the project manager. A strong project charter provides a strong support for the project manager. And here I would like to cite a project manager who in your book, The Road to Success, I think it's cited there. She wrote that something like this: if we had been met with resistance to the project in the company, I had no clear idea of how strongly we should force this through. This particular project manager got a project or got a task orally, without any paper, without any documentation. that tells about what are the expectations, what are the needs, why this is important. So in this project manager's mind, there was a gap. She was not able to decide how far she can go in order to satisfy the oral expectations by the project owner. So therefore, we say always a charter is a good start. So what are the main components of this charter? How it should look like? Well, a charter, as I said, it's a document. The first point on this charter should be the business need the project results are intended to address. You have a rationale, you have a cause, you have a reason. What is that? So actually, with the rationale, you describe the no situation. You say what is the problem simply is. And then you think ahead a little bit. You define the purpose of your project, the main purpose of your project. This is like a future-oriented expression of the project mission. Of course, the project mission is to solve the rationale, but it must have expectations. It must have ambitions. So this is the mission of your project. I will come back to these points as we go. I'm just providing an overall view of the content. After the purpose, you define the outcome. And the outcome here are the tangible effects or tangible and intangible gains of the project. What do we gain when I achieve this mission? What are the good things that I can gain so that I can force them through? And what are the negative gains? Because this is a potentially valid question. What are the potential negative gains? You define the potential gains in order to force them through, and you define the potential danger or potential negative aspects in order to address them as risks. So actually the project outcome gives you, or understanding the outcome, it gives you an overview over the opportunities you have in your project and the risks you have in your project. And you want to maximize the potentials or the opportunities, and you want to minimize or mitigate these risks. And perhaps the example I showed in the previous lecture with the hospital is an example of an organization that only looked at the gains from the project. They did not address the risks. They didn't have any idea what will be the consequences on work processes, on end users, on accept of the end users of this particular solution they have adopted. So outcome consists of two things: gains and risks. We need to understand that. And then you define the output. This is what will you be doing? What will you produce? What is it? Is it a document? Is it an element? Is it a component? Is it a robot? Is it a concept? And this is important because they define your scope. This is the actual work that you will be doing. And of course, as usual, who are the stakeholders and what are their success criteria for this project, and how they will assess these success criteria. You go further and you define the key success factors in your project. How I should manage this project? What are the main good management factors that I have to apply? In simple terms, by the way, the success factors are: how are you going to force the outcome, to force the positive gain, the opportunity, and how you will reduce the negative impact. It's simply as that. But you have to reflect on that. You have to identify the main guidelines of how you will be managing your project. And finally, you assign a project manager, identify the organizational structure and authority level. This is the charter or the main component of a charter. The rationale. The rationale is also called the triggering factor. Why the project uh, will be there. You are answering the why. Why are you going to start this project? Will the project solve a problem or perhaps prevent a problem? Or maybe it will take care of an opportunities. Usually, usually in many cases, it's a combination of these three questions. You try to solve a problem, you try to prevent a problem, or you have also an opportunity. And at the same time, because it is your strategy. Let's look at some of these. When the project is initiated to solve a problem, this problem could be like work accident, repeated work accident. All the time something wrong goes. You have to address that. Maybe you get frequent complaints by the end users. They complain about the quality of the product you have delivered. Maybe they complain about the safety, some safety issue, some functional issues. You need to address that. Or maybe there is new government requirements, new changes. The government changes the requirements of certain procedures. You need to adhere to that. Or at least if you have a demanding work process where you use a lot of effort, you use lots of resources to address or to execute these work processes, then you need to a project to do that. When it comes to preventing problems, this is the maintenance projects or upgrade projects or evaluation projects. You don't have any problem, there is no complaints, and everything seems to be fine, but you try to look ahead, try to be on front of the problems. You do maintenance, you upgrade, you make small upgrades here and there, and you evaluate the effectiveness of the methods you are using in your work processes. These are typical preventing problems causes. Sometimes you see an emerging market need. There is a new technology, like for instance, most of the digitalization projects we see today is because of this issue. Uh, People have expectations. I expect to do everything I need through a computer screen. I expect to watch a video, to watch a lecture, solve the problems, communicate with my supervisor, communicate with my teacher without leaving my home. This is something that's emerging right now. There is a new technology. There is the Internet of Things. There is Industry 4.0. These are powerful technologies that give us opportunities. Why we don't use them so that we reduce costs or take advantage of an opportunity? And sometimes it is a strategy. It's a part of your strategy. And if it is a part of your strategy, you are even willing to lose money. It is not a question of money here. No, it's part of my strategy. I want to come to a certain uh, uh, sector, become a part of something, and maybe it's a part of my branding effort, maybe it's a part of my profiling. Then you start a project, although you know it will not give you any financial advantage. It will not change anything, but it will change one thing: your profile, your profile as a developer or as a project owner. So this is our rationale. It's an important step in any project is to understand the rationale. and to agree on this particular rationale, because it will define one way or another your scope of work. The second issue that must be resolved is what we call the purpose or the mission statement. This is like a qualitative statement, usually not quantitative. It's a qualitative statement saying what the project results will be used for. What is the main function of your project? And here, we don't make any reference to the deliverables. You don't say how. You are only saying what the project results will be used for. For instance, without referring to the deliverables, very important, because until now you don't know the deliverables. You are just trying to have an overall view of your project. Examples. The mission statements could simply say the purpose of this project is to ensure accurate reporting and reduction of errors. I have an example. I will show this example on the next slide of it's a real case study where simply the main purpose of the project was to introduce a software solution, a combination of a software and hardware, and the main purpose was to ensure accurate reporting of the runaway status in Norwegian airports. Because the old method did not produce these accurate reports, and they wanted a software hardware solution to make sure that the status of the runways, where the planes land and take off, the status of these runways should be accurate at all times. Another mission statement could be simply say, resume the full operation in the shortest period of time. Let's say, assume that you have a facility and the facility was damaged due to fire, due to an accident or anything. So what will be the main purpose of your project? You don't have to say lots of qualitative statements. No, it is simply, I want to resume full operation in the shortest period of time. So the resumption of full operation is a mission statement. Perhaps I could mention that the most famous mission statement you are familiar with, perhaps, is the mission statement described by John F. Kennedy when they described the Apollo program. And the mission statement of the entire Apollo program is landing man on the moon before this decade is out and returning him safely to the earth. That's a mission statement of, in today's money, 150 billion US dollars. That's a huge amount of money, I think. You can't even imagine how much is that. But with this amount, for this amount of money, the statement was very simple: landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth, and that's it. There is no description of any hardware or any software. So a mission statement is something easy to understand. You can make sure, or it's easy for other stakeholders to understand, and it's easy for you to build commitment for this mission statement. And this mission statement becomes important when you are trying to evaluate different solutions. In order, a project is not only a mission statement, you have to make something. So when you are making this something, when you decide what to make, what to do, the mission statement become a control variable here. Which solution will give you the best mission statement? When the project results are in operation, you want to create benefits to the owner, benefits to the users, and benefits to the others. So what are these benefits? There is a very good example in the textbook, a case study called Plain Language at Norwegian Public Road Administration. In this particular project, you see this road administration or Norwegian Public Road Administration sends roughly around 3 million letters every year to the customers, to us, people who has cars. And in these letters, they ask them to do, we get information about different things, about renewing the license, about, for instance, changing the batteries of, this called automatic payment on the road. When you cross a road, you have to pay some fees. And instead of paying manually, every time you cross these points, there is a camera, take photo of your car, and they process transactions from there. So they notice that when they send these 3 million letters, they get back a lot of calls because people couldn't understand the content of these letters. They roughly counted like over 1 million hours they have to use on responding to inquiries by the customers who couldn't understand the meaning of the letters. Imagine that when you use like 1 million hours just responding to problems or customers who couldn't understand the meaning of the letter. So they started a project called Plain Language. And the purpose or the mission of that particular project was to make these letters understandable. That's all. To make the letters sent to the customers more understandable. And what will be the consequences of that? What will happen if you make your letters that you send annually more understand? Here comes the benefits. Here comes what we gain. These are the things you do your project in order to gain. You need to devise your project so that you attain these gains. Otherwise, you have no means to say that your project achieved its main purpose. For instance, if you notice that the number of inquiries sent by the end users was reduced, then the letters are more understandable. If you see that among your employees, they realize how important it is to write in a plain language, to write and to respond in a better way, in a correct language, understandable language, not the language of high bureaucrats. If you are able to save 1 million hours of resources that you have used on various inquiries, if you are able to reuse these resources on another type of tasks in your organization, then you have really achieved your purpose. If you gain better reputation among the end users, that is us, then they say, rather than getting an email, say, oh shit, again, couldn't understand anything, or bunch of idiots who runs the NPRA. People get angry, get upset. That's a bad reputation. So rather than getting this bad reputation, you get better reputation, better renommé, they say. These are the outcome, the gains. And if you don't get these things, then maybe it is not worth doing that particular project. And the final point here that I would like to share with you is the thing we call the deliverables. Okay, what shall I produce here? What I'll be doing? It could be a simple statement such as, okay, I will procure a system for electronic archiving. I will develop a solution for an A business. I will fix the production line. I will repair the production line. I will implement a training program. I will introduce task rotation. I will build an IT system and hardware, acquire hardware and software in order to produce these reports. So the deliverables actually is, or the output, are your deliverables. What will you be producing? It could be a simple thing, or it could be many, many, many small things. But this is your, what we call the solution to the task. In many cases, and I have experienced that with many students, they mix the output with the outcome. They mix purpose with the output. These are we have seen now 4 different things. The rationale is the problem. It is now situation. The purpose is you are expressing your ambition in the future. The output, you are expressing the results of this ambition. What you gain when you gain this or fulfill this ambition. And then you have the tools. What will you be doing in specific terms or in more general terms, like I will fix a production line. And then, of course, you have small deliverables which specify that. And in project management or in the textbook, you will see 2 types of outputs, mainly. You have a tangible output and you have non-tangible output. A tangible output is produce a certain component, product, report, system, and the like. Non-tangible result could be, well, a concept, an idea. That could be as well a deliverable, an idea. The final outcome, you deliver an idea. You deliver a concept. And perhaps the best example is this joint surgery case. This joint surgery case is actually an idea, a process, a concept. Do this, do that, do that, do that, do that. This is our final product. And it is there because we have problems with dealing with all these patients, and we would like to offer them quick recovery, and we want to reduce the waiting time and want to reduce the workload. It's as simple as that.